Hey all, good morning. How are you guys? Welcome to the second episode of the iGaming Exchange. As you know, in 2025, we actually exchanged our quarterly meetups to monthly meetups. So now we can cover more and more information. Guys, it's so crazy. Our Zoom is now only full with AI note takers, which is crazy nowadays when you just like plan a Zoom meeting and the person doesn't arrive, he just sends his AI to take notes. I'm actually also vibe coding in the meantime. I hope our speakers today know what that is. Otherwise, I will explain. It's a pretty crazy stuff. So basically, you do not need a coding or engineering degree nowadays. You just use ChatGPT to create parts of your code. So that is vibe coding. So basically, you're not a programmer. You're using an artificial intelligence to create parts of your program. So this is the new thing now. So today is a special episode. It's dedicated for the US market. We usually do this every 3 months. We used to do it on the Gaming Americas quarterly meetup, but we're keeping the tradition thanks to our awesome people here. Jeremy Kleiman, Bill Pascrell, Martin Lichka. Hi guys, nice to have you back.
Good to be back.
Thanks for having
Zoltan,
us.
thanks for having us. Love the new format.
All right, so this format, as you guys know, is mostly interesting in the archives, and it's also being cut into smaller pieces so people just can get the right information at the right time without being here or maybe watching the full episode. But of course, there are many tuning in, watching the full episode. So guys, I don't know who the moderator is today, but I will leave you guys to take over this virtual microphone, and I will be getting back to my vibe coding tasks. So take good care, all. I will be back at the end.
Thanks,
Jeremy's
Zoltan.
always the moderator.
Yeah, the usual
Okay,
routine, shall we?
I was hoping, fine. I was hoping we could pass the torch this time, mix it up. But all right, sure. So I think we only have 30 minutes, guys, right? This time?
Yeah,
I think
that's
so.
a bummer because, as you
Yeah.
know, Bill
No,
and
it's
I.
actually it's
No?
45 minutes or 1 hour you
Oh,
can
okay.
extend.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
okay. Okay. Good.
I was gonna say,
Um,
Bill and I normally need just a half hour to say hello in so many words. So it's good
yeah,
to have you got
exactly.
some more time.
Exactly. All right, guys, where do you want to start? Beginning of the year, beginning of legislative sessions and all that. I figure there's a bunch we could cover. iGaming, obviously. We probably should start there, I would think, and talk about the top 3 or 4 states where things where there seems to be momentum, and things may be moving. But as you guys know better than I do, right? Just because a bill is introduced or moves out of committee doesn't necessarily mean it's going anywhere. So, you know, I think we should cover, Virginia, Maryland, New York, maybe Florida. Where do you guys want to start? I'm going to kick it to you, Bill, Martin.
Bill, Americans first. It's the motto of the day. Do you want to go first?
I'm trying to power up my laptop, Martin. If you could just go, I'm on the phone and I'm just trying to I don't know what's going on here. My laptop's updating.
Oh, fingers crossed we won't lose Bill. On a
Yeah.
slightly more serious note, very good morning / afternoon / evening, wherever you may be. Apologies, I'm being slightly underdressed compared to my panel friends. The real me, just to explain that, is actually out there skiing. So this is my AR hologram, going back to Zoltan's point. He used to kick it all off, and hello to all the AI note takers. It's a real pleasure to meet some real life robots. Well, yes, iGaming, as usual, the topic at the beginning of the year. And as usual, and I'm not trying to be too cynical, there's a reasonable level of hope, more than a modicum, but we shall see how it all goes going forward. I suppose to link it back to the discussions we've already had. at these forums, especially on our panel. Our friends in the great state of New York, namely Senator Adabo and not sure what that was, Assemblyman Pretlow are doing their best to get online casino iGaming, if you will, regulate it. But let's see how it goes this year. Bill, feel free to chime in, but I believe the stance on New York hasn't changed that much. So those two guys will be trying very hard at the same time. It would appear that the governors rather key priority on the casino side of things remain the downstate casinos. So that would be my quick take on New York regarding the other states that Jeremy has mentioned. As the audience might recall, Maryland got quite close last year. So let's see if they could pick it up where they left it off. It's of course good to see that there may be some movement in Virginia, and indeed, let's see what's going to happen in Florida, because that's for the last few years Florida's been a bit of a dark horse, if not a wild card. I'm sure everyone will recall that the Seminole tribe and Governor DeSantis did really well to get sports betting regulated down there in their own special way, but fair enough. So the question is whether they could use the same format, the same scheme to regulate iCasino in the state of Florida. And I suppose one final point, I'm sure Jeremy, we will come onto that, but when talking about casinos, online casinos, we would be remiss in not mentioning and perhaps elaborating on the still very recent ban of sweepstakes and sweepstake casinos in the state of Mississippi, because of course the future legal status of sweepstake casinos might have a material impact on the overall debate around online gaming, if not online gambling, as in gaming and sports betting up and down the nation.
That's a good point. And if we have time, we could certainly spend some time talking about sweepstakes and the impact in Mississippi. I think the sweepstakes ban was in the legislation that was just proposed to also ban all forms of online casino, and I think that was a shot at the other house in the Mississippi legislature that isn't moving it forward. But we'll see if that passes. But yeah, we could spend a whole session on sweepstakes for sure. Billy, good morning.
Like Bill's powered
Morning. Good morning. Look, we know several bills got dropped in January with the start of the legislative calendar in New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, Illinois, Hawaii, Wyoming, Indiana, and Virginia. It seems like Virginia, Indiana, and Wyoming are most likely not going to go forward this year. I know that Pretlow is now no longer chair of the gaming committee, Assemblyman Pretlow in New York. He's now chairman of Ways and Means, which gives him more juice, which gives more viability. His chief of staff, who Martin and I had, I think a year or two ago, I know I had dinner with him last August in Saratoga. I think Martin did the year before. I'm not sure, but he's coming to the boot camp at Seton Hall, which is great, which Jeremy, you were a longtime lecturer at. So we'll get a chance to huddle up there. Senator Adabo, who I talk to quite frequently, remains eternally optimistic, even though we know that there's only 7 states with iGaming, and there's a bit of a stigma surrounded by it. But I think the more there's this conversation about state budgets, the more chance there is for success. State budgets across the country are challenged. There's no longer the federal money that's coming in for various things like PPP. The Trump administration is carving back spending, including, Build Back Better, infrastructure funds, Inflation Reduction Act funds. So states are going to be struggling. And that's why a state like Wyoming is exploring this, even though they don't have really many gaming offerings other than historical horse racing. I think Maryland, I know I've talked to Governor Westmore multiple times, including back in December last year, is extremely interested in it, but the legislature has to get the bill to his desk. Um, you know, I, I think another state which really hasn't um, moved much in the past, the regulator there in Illinois is extremely interested in doing this, but there is still some hesitancy by the legislature. And until that changes, Illinois would be a great opportunity because of the size of the state, the great rich tradition there with, they just built a casino. Bally's just built a casino there in Chicago. I think one thing that's pushing back on what I thought was going to be a first mover this year in New York is Governor Hochul's prioritization of the downstate casinos. And we believe that a decision is going to be made there in the first half of this year, which maybe frees up some more time in the second half of the year. But as you know, they got to get a budget done, and that's usually where iGaming legislation would come from. So I mean, I did a debate with our friend Jeff Hipther at the end of last year on this. I was more optimistic, but I had to take the other side of the debate. I think we may see one or two states this year, but I'm not extremely optimistic. I think on the sports betting side, all eyes are on Texas, but the lieutenant governor isn't there yet. And without him, nothing's going to move. So that's where we're at.
Appreciate your thoughts on that. It's interesting, right? I mean, 2, 3, 4 years ago, we were all sort of putting our money on Indiana, right? So legislation, there was momentum, the regulator was in support of it, and it's like year after year, it didn't happen. Now, this year, it went from the last few years sort of being on the cusp of getting done in Indiana to like the bill this year, I think is dead already. It's just DOA in the House.
That's
It's
right.
interesting how things changes. And in a place like Maryland, my understanding is, that the bill this year is more or less identical to last year. And the problem was it just couldn't get through the legislature because the land-based casinos were like this, right? Yet Cedars and MGM were in support of it. Cordish and Churchill said absolutely not. And as we know, Cordish being based in Maryland, it's pretty. I think Baltimore is pretty influential. So, like, unless we can get those guys on board, the land-based casinos, I don't see how anything changes this year in Maryland. But what do
Yeah,
I
it's
know?
a shame. It's a shame too, because their arguments are really antiquated. They're the same arguments that were brought up in other states, like the first mover, New Jersey, that I had to sort out, 11 years ago. We're approaching the 12-year anniversary of iGaming in Jersey. The most recent state to move was Rhode Island last year, which was successful, but a rather small state and what I would call a monopoly state because Bally's is the only operator. But the other thing that I think is important from an industry perspective, I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again, hopefully, maybe in a kinder, gentler way. The industry really has been terrible at coalescing and working collaboratively together to move this. And now they're going to be fighting multiple fronts. For example, you have states like New Jersey, which everybody respects as the platinum standard. Governor Murphy just gave his budget address yesterday. It's his last budget. He's a lame duck governor. And he has proposed, and I told the industry this is coming, but he's proposed increasing sports betting from 13 to 25 and online casino from 15 to 25 percent tax. Now, the industry needs to step up to the plate. I was able to get 2 senators yesterday within an hour of that address because no senator wanted to be out front before the governor gave his speech. Senator Tester, who's a big South Jersey Republican, and Senator Berzicelli, who's in the seat that former Senate President Steve Sweeney held and was the sponsor of the original bill in the Assembly, had just come out vehemently opposed to the governor's increase in the tax. And why? And this is the frustration. The industry should be saying this, not just the politicians, but they understand it's going to impact jobs. We have a great tax rate in New Jersey. It's one of the lowest in the country. But if Jersey's able to raise the tax by, 10 points, every other state's going to start looking at it. Jersey can do it, and they're looked at as a thought leader. The problem is it's gonna be diminutive in terms of innovation. It's gonna start. Jersey's created over 24,000 jobs in the iGaming industry alone in the last 10 years. Those are good, high-paying jobs. Those investments are not going to continue at that tax rate. And they're doing it both on sport and on gaming. So, I mean, I think the industry needs to get in early. We've got 4 months to kill this, and we need to kill it and stop it dead in its tracks. And it's not a negotiation, maybe going from 15 to 20 or 13 to 20. It's no new tax, period. And the funny part about it is, because I got a lot of calls from reporters last night, and reporters are great people. They tend to be studious, but they're not practical, right? They're like, well, Bill, like, what makes you think you're going to be successful? It seems like this is a done deal. I said, well, you have a bipartisan coalition of senators already opposed to it. The governor can only afford to lose 4 more Democratic votes. And, a guy like Senator Sarlo, Jeremy, who is in your county, is not going to support this because of the Meadowlands. Vingo Paul, who represents Monmouth Park Racetrack, is not going to support it because of Monmouth Park. We haven't even talked about the senators from the South in and around Atlantic County. But this should be an all hands on deck effort so that we can pivot, kill this, and then pivot back to proactive legislation to try to get other states across the line. The industry has failed abysmally. Great story to tell, no messenger, nobody delivering the message, job creation, tax revenue, responsible gaming, integrity, all of those issues happen, and there is no proof anywhere in the globe, particularly in the US, that by introducing iGaming, you're going to introduce cannibalization. What we did to take that issue off the table 11 years ago was to partner with the whole skin solution with the casinos. And you talk to any brick and mortar, the 9 remaining casinos in Atlantic City, they would be shuttered now if it wasn't for iGaming.
Perhaps if I may add, at the risk of stating the obvious, and all 3 of us are putting words into Bill's and Jeremy's mouth, but I'm sure they will agree. Zoltan keeps kindly inviting us, which is great, but it starts feeling like a Groundhog's Day. Because we need to address the perennial issue of iGaming and iGaming legislation. Especially in the last few years, it feels like we keep saying the same things. And I suppose we can't be blamed because Bill is absolutely spot on. That is the situation out there. As they say, hope springs eternal. So at the beginning of every year, there's a lot of hope. This is the year iGaming will be done. And don't get me wrong, I wish so much it were true. But then, for a variety of reasons, mainly external or even third-party related circumstances, very sadly and very unfortunately, those bills that tend to be dropped at the beginning of each legislative session and then name a state, start falling by the wayside. So yes, indeed, there's somewhere there has to be a snag or glitch in the matrix. So I suppose to some extent we do need to apologize to the audience, but please bear with us. We're all hoping that things will get far better on this side of things. That is the first point. The other point, if Jersey, and I'm not saying that because as the audience might recall as well, for the last 3 years, and hope for many more years to come, I have been and will have been a very proud resident of the Garden State. It's Garden, it's not garbage, so not Adabo. If Jersey puts up its tax rate, I suppose we have no choice but to think or even assume that this will create a very, very dangerous precedent for other states who might have been considering doing the same, but for now, they've been looking at Jersey as the proverbial shining city on the hill that's got it right. It's got a more than, as Bill pointed out, more than a decent tax rate. It's attracted pretty much the whole global and American industry. It's created a lot of jobs, and lot is an understatement in this case. But if these guys down in Trenton decide that now is the time to put the tax rate up, as I've said, there is at least a certain, if not even a high risk, that some other states that may have perhaps procrastinated, hesitated, waited, they were looking around, they might be thinking, well, if these guys have done it, they got to have a very good motive to do it. Let's look and revisit our tax rates as well. So I would suggest that that's yet another reason to try and go and kill it. And there's no shadow, the doubt in my mind that Mr. Pasquale here, and I'm not saying that because we're very good friends, is the man that might be able to achieve that. Hand in hand with that, 2 more points very briefly. Hand in hand with that goes the risk of increased activity, elevated activity within the black market. Because any tax increase, especially of this potential magnitude, is yet again, very sadly, only playing into the hands of the black market operators who'll be thinking, oh, cool, across the river, we got the state of New York, 51% tax rate. With rampant black market already. And now we'll go through the tunnels, we land in New Jersey, and lo and behold, they're potentially going up to 25%. Isn't that great for all the black market operators? So perhaps that needs to be woven into the message for the politicians. So it's not only about the industry, though I agree with Bill, with what Bill has said, but also the politicians, I would suggest, need to be put on alert and notice that this could be perhaps an unintended consequence of any such move. Finally, at the risk of being exposed of the country by Messieurs Trump and Musk, because what I'm going to say might be perceived as very non-American, I believe especially the international audience will be aware of the fact that at least some countries outside of the United States have followed a very, very similar trajectory. Bring the operators in, create a thriving industry, but hang on, this is making us very good money. Could it make us even more money with a view to potentially plugging some budget holes? So I believe there's an overall risk related, or there's a risk related to the overall political climate with the states such as New Jersey, potentially others, following the patterns that have been already established at the other side of the pond. So in that regard, and that's the very final point, I would, with all humility, recommend everyone to take a very, very close look at Spain. Spain that regulated online gambling pretty much at the same time as New Jersey, actually, I've just realized. So some 12, 13 years ago, the tax rate was 25%. And a few years later, it went down to 20. Because down there in Spain, the government smartly realized that they could generate more traffic, more tax revenue, if they decrease the rate to something more sensible, something more rational and manageable. So I would strongly suggest, and I will stop there, that actually that's the path to follow when it comes to taxation of gambling.
Hey, Jeremy, if I just may, here's the problem. And I know, Jeremy, I know you well, I know Martin well, I know Zoltan well. I wanna make a point, and hopefully these AI note takers will put this in big bold letters, because I think it's important. You cannot approach government affairs with AI at all. There's no solution. Government affairs, unlike what you do every day, Jeremy, which is very intellectually challenging, which is legal work. Government affairs is about trusted long-term relationships. I want to just say at the outset, and like if I'm going to offend somebody, so big, I'm not going to apologize. The industry's been an abysmal failure. They think because 40 states have passed sports betting that they should take credit for all that. No, sports betting is relatively easy and kind of sorts itself out, as opposed to casino and poker, which tends to be more of a challenge, not only in the Deep South and the Bible Belt. But I have the scars to prove that I know how to get this done. Every brick and mortar casino, including the Association in New Jersey, fired me because I was pushing for iGaming. Then they ended up hiring me back. Then they ended up thanking me. Why did they fire me? Because they thought that online was going to cannibalize them. In every state in the country, whether they have online, the 7 states that have it, plus Nevada with poker only, and the states that don't, have a vibrant black market. Instead of debating whether we should have iGaming or not, we should be moving on to try to find ways to penetrate the black market. The black market doesn't help the 3 of us or anybody on this call, okay? And when are we going to educate better politicians about the power of the black market, the vibrance of the black market? Esai Scheinberg, the founder of PokerStars, took a risk with me, okay? Back then, 13 years ago, I was very successful doing what I was doing, but I didn't have a proven track record on the digital gaming side. Esai and Caesars were paying $40 million a year each for the past 10 years leading up to 2010. So 2000 to 2010, $80 million by the 2 of them, and didn't even get a committee hearing. One of the sponsors of the bill, I didn't know at the time, the prime sponsor was Barney Frank. My dad was one of 30 other sponsors. My dad wouldn't know, God rest his soul, iGaming if it hit him over the head. The industry didn't educate him. They're like, oh, this guy's important. Well, let's have him introduce the bill. So I told Esai to take a risk. Give me 10% of that rev and give me 2 years and get it done. And we got it done, right? And why did we get it done? Because everybody else talks about this in a very boring, note-taking way. There's no passion, there's no exuberance, there's no charisma putting forward. We have a great story to tell. We don't have anybody telling it. And that's the problem. We shouldn't be going in one by one to politicians, governors, or legislators. We should be going in together with a unified message and then sorting out the competitive nature of this after the legislation passes. Just like we need to do with social casino, DFS plus 2. These guys don't see it coming, but you saw what just happened to High Five Games, Jeremy, just a couple of weeks ago with the state of Washington penalizing them $25 million for being violative of the law, right? And so iGaming has to put their big boy and big girl pants on and understand that the lobbyists, regulatory affairs councils that they're utilizing right now aren't doing their job. I'm not going to call names out, but they're just not doing their job. We should pick 3 or 4 states, focus on them, and get them done. New York would be a big win for the industry, but I wouldn't put the chances of it passing at greater than 30% right now.
Well, you and I
Thank
have talked about this many, many times over the years that the industry is not speaking with one unified voice. There's no single message, unified message, and you know um, we can go on and on, right? And we've talked about this, at every quarterly meetup in the context, just as an example of California and the debacle in getting sports betting done in California.
Yep.
And it's death by circular firing squad because everyone's coming in with their own agenda. Nobody's coordinating, and everyone's telling a different story and has a different message instead of figuring out how to deliver the message on behalf of the entire industry. And then, as you say, and then sort out who gets what and what the different stakeholders are going to get out of the deal after it's done, right? So
That's
yeah, so I mean, look, you definitely are much closer to the politics than I am, but I am not optimistic, quite honestly, about any of these states getting done this year. I think that would be, a home run if 1 or 2 iGaming states got done this year. I just don't see it because I don't think I don't see anything having changed. And the storyline of budget crisis, state needs revenue, we've heard that year after year, and that doesn't necessarily get it across the line either. So and in a weird way, right? I'm just pivoting a little bit to sports betting away from casino. Um, you have states like Maryland and even Vermont that have introduced legislation to repeal sports betting and lose all that revenue. Like I don't get that. You have a take on that, either of you?
I think it's
Well,
just people who
sorry,
are
Bill. Go for it.
I think it's people who are misreading the data. There's not one singular reason, but I think there's folks that believe that sports betting's onslaught and launch has created a health crisis. I just debated Harry Levant on that. I think it's a pseudo health crisis. There's no proof anywhere in the world, and I represent both sides of the equation, operators and responsible gaming entities. There's no proof in the world that the number of potential problem gamblers has increased from 1 to 2% of the population. And by the way, we didn't ban cars because of drunk driving. We put seatbelts in cars, right? And so we need to find ways to put seatbelts on the ride for sports betting. So I think problem gambling's been a part of that. And there are some people who are really transparent about it, and others who want to use the increased number of calls to the 1-800 problem gambler number as which is so silly that anybody draws this conclusion. I just appeared for an hour before Governor Murphy's problem gambling task force on Friday. The problem with the task force, and I respect it, is by the time they give their report out, the legislature will be out of session and nothing's going to happen until the next governor comes in, right? It's taken too long. And two, I hate being in closed sessions. Why am I speaking to just the task force? Why can't other people listen in? Why isn't there a recording? Because I want to talk to a broader audience, not just the task force. Be that as it may, I think increased calls to the problem gambling number is not proof that there's an increase in problem gambling. As Martin and I know, when we visited Oasis, the treatment government agency in New York, they told us, we didn't have to lobby them, that a good majority of those calls are for tech support or customer service, right? What do you call? Oh my God, it says 1-800 number. Let me call problem gambling, right? Let me call this number. But the problem is that the problem gambling folks who have the best of intentions are not being very transparent about the law. So that's one thing. And the second thing is there are still many people who I know you and Martin respect that think that it's either a sin or it's not appropriate to have the state backing sports betting. What they're not understanding is forget about the revenue and the jobs, okay? You want to do it to also protect consumers. Because the more people that bet legally as opposed to the black market, you think in the state of Texas, people are betting on sports? Probably they're doing more betting on sports in Texas than there are in any other state in the country that's legalized it. Because it's all black market on the street or on the internet. So, Jeremy, great point. Those bills are going to continue because the industry hasn't done its job at educating the policymakers across the country.
I'd suggest,
Go
if I may, that there's a pattern of theme woven through all this. And that's an inherent inability to compromise when it comes to legislation, when it comes to responsible gambling. You both mentioned that as an industry, we're not talking with one voice. We're not. And that's a huge shame. And I would apply, as I've just said, the same pattern to the responsible gambling debate. There are entrenched positions on both sides of the divide. And I would very much advocate for an all-industry debate about responsible gambling. Let's bring the detractors in. If someone's interested in filming it, to Bill's other point, then even better. Let's bash it out. Let's try to find a way forward, because indeed, nothing is only black and white. There is bound to be a compromise. And that, as a society, I'm going all philosophical now, apologies, that's what we should be aspiring to. That's what we should be striving to achieve, because indeed, even if, and the likelihood I'd like to think is extremely low, but if even some of those bills you have both alluded to in the likes of Vermont and Maryland might prosper, it's not as though sports betting in one way or another, legal or illegal, would go away. Folks would continue doing it. And that's the key, that's the cardinal argument why we're much better off driving all this, ushering it into the regulated space, because then we have more control. And once we've got everybody in, let's have that debate. And as someone who's been on the operator side for the last nearly 16 years, I totally appreciate the economic dynamics and all the revenue arguments. Yes, we need to keep feeding the beast, if you will. There are people to pay, there are partners to pay. And that all stands, and that's all spot on, but there's got to be a way of trying to find a compromise. And a final point in this round, again, going and looking outside of the US for an example that perhaps as a nation that I'm still a guest to, we may try to follow. Brazil, might have mentioned it in this forum before, actually happened to be wearing my Brazilian soccer team jersey today. Go Palmeiras. Just like in any other jurisdiction. Are all the operators best friends? Well, no, they're not, because we're competing for the limited resource being the pool of customers. But I can guarantee you, as someone who, if you pardon the pun, I'm perhaps overusing that expression, who for the last 2 years has been in the trenches of the Brazilian Congress and elsewhere to get the market regulated, of course, with quite a few others, we managed to find ways of working very effectively together. We got the legislation over the proverbial line while working with the regulator. The regulator produced regulation. Is the regulation perfect? Well, no regulation is perfect, but in my book, it's a very good piece of regulation that got done, and right at the home straight in the run-up to the launch that did happen, did take place on the 1st of January this year, though this feels like 15 years ago by now, we had to fend off a number of assaults on the regulation itself. And yet again, the industry managed to pull together and fend it all off. And as a result, we've got a thriving market with some 70 plus license operators that tend to have, on average, 2 brands in that market. So the regulated industry is catering to the demand of the Brazilian public. Of course, don't get me wrong, there's still a black market. There are the fly-by-night operators who are trying to take advantage, work to be done there. But really the point I'm trying to make, just to corroborate what Bill and Jeremy have said, in the States, just like maybe a different country from many other countries, but in this regard, all the countries are the same. We indeed need to pull together, start working much more effectively and efficiently together when it comes to regulatory government affairs to create a framework in which we will then go back and be at each other's throats, but on the business side of things. That's where it's appropriate. When it comes to regulatory affairs, yes, we do need to work together, and there's inspiration to be had. I could be talking about Ontario, European jurisdictions. We don't have enough time, but all the successful markets, that's the bottom line, got done because the industry managed, albeit for a limited period of time, managed to shunt its divergences, its differences aside with a view to achieving a common goal. And we've got all the AI note takers dropping like flies.
Hey, Jeremy, we're bumping up on 45 minutes. I just want to make sure one more point gets addressed. I could stay on for a little bit longer. But I mean, I hope the point I made earlier gets through. It probably won't, but I hope it gets through. But, you know, another big problem is Missouri passed legislation, and we know that the emergency rule has been delayed, which is unfortunate. So Missouri won't launch until the earliest, in the end of Q3 in the fall, which is a shame, right? And you know, the only stakeholders benefiting from that are the black market and the surrounding states that have sports betting. So listen, after a while, you know, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. I'm amazed at how poor the operators have been with focusing on GR and how they've executed it. I'm just amazed. You know, it's like anything else, Jeremy. Why are you successful, Jeremy? Because you're not a white shoe Fifth Avenue law firm. You're a firm that gets things done, has the track record, has decades of experience, and are successful, right? And that breeds success. You know, a lot of folks come in from across the pond or across the globe into America thinking they need to hire some white shoe firm, accounting firm, law firm, lobby firm, right? And they tend to not get the service, and they tend to get very bad results, but they get a lot of good lip service because those companies oftentimes are very good at what they do, but oftentimes they're not good at other things like moving the dial and getting stuff done. And why we don't go back and look at the history of the last 11, 12 years in America on iGaming is incredible to me, because there are very few companies that have any credibility in the space that have got something done. Maybe that'll change, but I don't see it. And the other thing that's important to note, we mentioned it briefly, is that the DFS plus two and the sweepstakes social casino companies, I think many of them would rather just continue to churn than do what they're they should be doing, which is proactively going in and meeting with regulators and legislators to explain to them they are complying with existing law, right? And they're happy to have that law change and have them be licensed, right? That's okay, because then they can be a little bit more front of foot on other issues like AML, age verification, money laundering, et cetera. But the reason that these companies are being dragged across the coals, fined, well, we're even hearing word that some of them are going to be criminally indicted. Um, because I think they rather just make a money grab until it all comes tumbling down, and that's unfortunate.
I agree with you, Bill, on that. I think that many of those operators have made the calculation that, low-hanging fruit, they're going to make as much money as they can in unregulated markets as quickly as possible, and have built into their financial models that, over the next, 12, 24, 36 months, one by one, US states they're gonna have to shut off. But that's okay, because we've modeled out that we're gonna make X revenue in the short term, and then we'll deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. It's
Yep.
unfortunate.
Yep.
All right, guys, we're pushing up on 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we can wrap it up. I mean, we could spend another hour talking about all of the nuances and ins and outs of sweepstakes and DFS 2.0.
Yeah.
Whether it's legal, illegal, whether it's something other than gambling. But we'll have to save that one for another day.
Yep.
We could do that next time. Suppose in the meantime, for those of you in
We
the
could.
States, enjoy the March Madness that will be upon us before we know it. And we got Zoltan back. You can also read
Hey,
the
Zoltan.
takeaways from all the note takers in the chat.
Exactly.
So,
Hopefully they
Zoltan,
will
hopefully you're
share.
not replacing us with bots, but if you are, it's been quite a ride, so thank you.
Oh no, never. Guys, where can people meet you in the next coming months? Because there are loads of conferences everywhere. So, Jeremy, let's start with you.
I will be at Next in New York the next couple weeks. I think in 2 weeks. I'm not quite sure where after that, but I will be there. So anyone who wants to meet up in New York, let me know.
All right, Martin.
Well, you're almost welcome to come to our house in Hoboken. My wife might be inclined to divorce me if too many of you turn up, but that's where we live, so feel free. I'll be at Next as well, and of course, as one of the founding fathers, together with Mr. Pasquale, we will be at the Seton Hall Compliance Bootcamp next week, and that will be a lot of fun because it's not a conference, it's much more exciting. So those of you who can still make it, we still have some slots and spots available.
All right, Bill, I know that you are heading to Rio or not, or what's probably your next event is next as well.
Yeah, I'll be at the boot camp next week, Seton Hall, which is more of a boot camp. It is a boot camp. It's not a conference. Following week, next IO. Then I'll be with you in Prague at the end of
Oh
March,
yeah.
which I always enjoy, and have a few panels. Thank you for that. You're doing an incredible job, because I can't believe what this conference used to attract years ago, which was a couple hundred people. Now it's exploding, and everybody recognizes it, and that's great, and that's a tribute to you. April will be the Italian Gaming Expo. That'll be my second year there in Rome. May will be the EGR Clarion, I'm sorry, the Clarion Leaders Summit in London for 2 days. And then we have, Nickel G's and Michael Golub's Association of Regulators. That's going to be in Nashville. Nickel G's will be in Louisville. We have Saratoga. The list goes on and on. But I'm looking forward to seeing
Goes
everybody
everywhere. Goes
in their
everywhere.
team in Prague.
All right, good. It's good that you
Thank you.
mentioned Prague, because we had Head and Shoulders reaching out to us to promote in the Czech Republic and Slovakia their products and giving VIP tickets for 6 lucky people to attend the conference. So this is quite something big for us.
Great.
A company coming outside of the gaming industry being interested to giving tickets for attendees. So guys, thank you so much. And the US special will be back in 3 months probably before these guys jet off to their vacation. So take good care, everyone. Thank you for joining. And make sure to subscribe to receive all the snippets and everything about these awesome short episodes. So take good care. Bye-bye.
And if
Thank
you
you,
go
Zoltan.
to Prague,
Thanks,
you
Zoltan.
get
Zoltan.
free head
See
and
you, everyone.
shoulders. As a Czech, I'm getting a bit offended that our hair is apparently dirty.